joined today by Meir Kolko from Meir Kolko Designs. I'm super excited to have you on the podcast because we recently did an event together, and it was such a pleasure working alongside you, seeing your genius in motion and action, and seeing how you transform the space. So I'm super excited for this conversation.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for inviting me on the show on your podcast. It's amazing to be here. And yeah, that was a pleasure to work with you on that event. And it was absolutely the outcome was fantastic. I like how it all came together.
Yeah, and we kept on getting so many compliments, but it was really just a joint effort, right? Everybody has their zone of expertise, their vision, and it was really such a joint effort. So um, hope we do it again soon.
Yeah,
Um,
that was a great team. Great team.
yeah. So I'm going to jump right in and ask you, what is your strongest skill when it comes to aesthetics?
All right. So aesthetics, there's so many different parts of aesthetics, obviously, and it all comes together. The main thing is that when we actually look at something, we are looking at the light that is bouncing off of it. That's one of the key factors. You may create in your mind a space with different colors, wallpapers to paintings to countertops and events, florals, and there's dishes that reflect different light. So whatever light you're shining on an object, I think that is one of the key factors. And it plays, people don't necessarily realize it when you walk into a space, but that's the key factor to actually hit the aesthetic properly, the lighting that you're using for it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that even as a designer, that's not necessarily something. Obviously, lighting goes into it, but after seeing you in action and hearing everything that you brought to the table, I didn't realize just how much it, plays a role in how everything comes together. So I really appreciate that about what you do. And who in your life had the biggest impact on you today, and why?
That's a good question. Who was that person? So it's kind of like I'd say it was would be my dad. And the reason I'm saying that is because he was a father, but he was also a mentor in the sense that we grew up with the concept in our family that which stuck with me. I really absorbed this is that anything's possible. The question is how do you arrive there? Like because I saw my dad doing things that most of my friends, dads would not do. Is that oh you need to redo your kitchen? Okay, so I'm going to go to the store, buy the parts, take a take it apart and rebuild it. He'll do it himself. How do you do it? You figure it out. When he was a child, he would go to the library to take out books. When he was 12 years old, he was building arcade machines. And throughout his lifetime, he was a teacher. Primarily, he's a grade school Rebbe, but his um, his class always had, by each season, a wood like a wood menorah or a grogger or a stender or some sort of game, and always connecting back to Judaic, different things to teach the kids different things and spend the time building it. So I saw that throughout my life as a child and then as a teenager, as all there was. I have currently a dreidel, right, originally designed in 1970s by my dad, that's rideable because he had a class and he wanted to give them something that's interactive and a dreidel. So he built an actual steel structure and a wood structure around it, and it was stable. And he was an engineer, not by necessarily the schooling of it, but over time, since a child, he was figuring things out, picked it up, and that you can climb into. Now it rotted out and it wasn't usable. I basically took all the structure of it and rebuilt it. So I have that now sitting in a pod, and that is just one thing. There's many things that I built over time or rebuilt, or that was one thing that I rebuilt. But basically, I saw that the initiative to if you want something, you can figure it out, and there's many approaches to how to accomplish the goal. And this was primary in building structural things, actually creating things. I'd say that I've taken that to where we are in like 2024 on the journey. And how do I do that with today's tools? I don't have to go to the library. I have Google, YouTube. There's so many tools that you don't have to go to school necessarily. You can if you're not disciplined. But if you love something, whatever you love, you're going to go ahead and do. So I grew up with building my own clubhouse, doing all different things that hands on, creating and fabricating. that that influence of just you can do it. And by the way, this is how you do it. The guidance. Battery has two parts. Connect the wire across. So that was definitely an influence. I'd say a strong influence in the design aspect, the aesthetic aspect, and getting into where I arrived today, which is a journey. But that's how it started. I'd say.
Wow. So he really helped you expand your mind in terms of what's possible and show you that you can create it with your own two hands. My father
Yes.
was like that as well. My father is originally a cabinet maker, and he built with me Noah's Ark when I was in grade school out of wood. So I completely appreciate that sentiment. That's really cool.
I had that experience, Noah's Ark, many times in life of building projects like that for school and different things. One that stands out in recent history is I took on a project of building a mizbeach and a choshes. Basically, there was a father who had a child's project in his school, realized that he promised him something he can't deliver because he's not that creative. He calls me up and says, "Can you create this?" Now, this is going back a bunch of years when I was still I was doing fabrication back then. Now it's transferred into many more things, but I actually designed and built with my dad's help actually because I was asking him questions. Always ask him his opinion on things, and in terms of design, and basically we created a very large. It came apart. Mizbeach and Achosh is very similar to the actual description that it gives in the Torah, and that was one recent thing like that where it was Judaic and it was an art piece and similar building things like you said like you did with your dad. It's very interesting that you had that as well. It's very interesting to see how people are influenced by their environments. What you tell your kids. This is like not even talking about like the business aspect, but how you go ahead and are dynamic and build them up in different ways and give them the confidence that if even if the world pokes a million holes in that bag, they're still doing it and they'll figure it out. They build the confidence in that sense. So doing hands-on projects is important. Yeah,
Absolutely. I love that you had that because it really transfers to everything. It's really a mindset when you can go and you feel confident to build it yourself and it's all figure outable, then you can really apply that to anything that you do. And there's a lot of no people in the world. No, I can't do that. No, that it's not going to work. But when you come to any project, whether it's lighting or design or a real estate deal, and you come with an open mind and a can do attitude, there are amazing things that can happen when you bring that all together.
I'd say that that is also a big aspect. Is how do you engage? And I think having mentors who guide, especially at a younger age, guide your acumen in engaging people. So that's important too. Is engagement, I guess. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when did you decide that you wanted to begin your career? Was there a specific moment or a turning point that inspired you?
It's actually a very good question. It's hard to pinpoint the current start of where um, the current I say industry I'm in because it's a very broad spectrum of what I do, um, all dealing with aesthetics. And I didn't know I wanted to do this till a certain point, but the starting point I'd say is when I was a child and I have Legos, and I'm constructing different things with them, starting out with basics, following instructions or doing my own imaginative things, and then realizing that, hey, I could put light bulbs in this Lego, but how do I do that? How do I want my house to have a light fixture in it, and it doesn't come on any of the sets. So how do I do that? Um, so I started messing around with a battery and a light bulb. I didn't know what. There was no instruction manual back then. You can't just go to Google like how do you connect two points of. So I just like who knows. So parental figure. I go to my dad. I'm like, what I do. So he just shows me. It's like there's a wire, Radio Shack items. There's a wire. This is the battery. This is where you connect it to. This is how it runs to the light. It has to make a loop and it finishes a circle, a circuit. And this is how you do it. And if you want to make a switch, there's a switch, or just touch two wires together. And I'm like, wow, that's all it takes to turn a light bulb on. Like, you're obviously standing on the shoulders of giants of people, of technology. But like in today's day and age, you need a battery and you need this. And okay, so I did that, and then I realized that how do I make the wire not be seen? I'm already doing like making sure that you don't see the wires, like because in a house you don't see the wires. I'm just child curiosity. I'm trying to figure things out. So I stripped down the wire to one copper strand and I laid it inside the Legos, and it still made the connection. Power did go through it. I'm like, hey. So I hid the wire and I put a fixture in that was the first one. And to make a switch, I just took the car door, of the Lego piece that opens and closes the car. It's one piece. And I taped the wire on one part and the other part. So when you close the car door on the house in a little spot, it's a switch. So that was my light switch. So then I realized I could do that. That led to me, hey, how does the motor work? So then I made my helicopter start spinning with a motor. And then my friends like, hey, I have a science project. Can you do it? Can you help me do it? And one thing, like as times go, like, I'm putting lights on my rollerblades at night to be seen. I'm installing like a light on the back of my rollerblade, a strobe light from Radio Shack. And that's like I'm seen from a mile away, like a plane, in terms of safety. Like, so I was always doing those little things. I wouldn't say that was a starting point for the career, but I would say that like that was something that definitely had an impact. That like, hey, this is something that I'm capable of doing. The confidence in it, and then as time went on, I had many different experiences where, going through childhood and teenagers, like where I wasn't so good at certain things in school, and I was really good at certain things, and I guess over time it developed from transferring from a teenager going to school, learning different things. I started social work school at one point, to I wanted to help people, and I was doing things like that in terms of the social work. And then as I was, I was like, okay, social work's good, but I prefer something hands-on because it was giving me more CPUC, more enjoyment. And I went on to start construction where I was doing home repair and another aspect. These are all leading up. High Lifeline was a huge part of it, where I was first a counselor, but the second year already, my camper wasn't engaging so much of the people around them. So I wanted to use what they do in camp every day as a theme, kind of like start engaging people via the theme because it makes it more fun, playful in camp. So I don't know if you know Camp Simple. High Life is basically a summer camp for children with cancer and different.
I believe you were there with my husband, actually.
So that's an interesting story because
Yeah.
so we studied together at a certain point in school, and
Right.
then um, I actually had. It's very interesting to bring this up, and this goes back to personality. We'll go side tangent for a second. Get back on the story. The um, I had a camper who was not engaged. I knew he liked music and certain things, and then um, Shmuel was a very happy-go-lucky, smiley dude, and has something to do with Breslov and something to do with Hasidus and certain things, certain spiritual things. But basically, he was generally upbeat and a pleasure to be with. So I said I have a summer camp where I have a camper who can use. So I brought him as a co-counselor in a camp, and he was dynamic in the sense that he always had music. He always livened up the situation, and we started to do that, like dress up for theme. And the response from our camper at this point was like he was singing, he was in a wheelchair, was singing and happy, and people were like, "Oh, who are these fun people? Let's hang out." So it helped the dynamic, it helped a lot, and it left me a little bit of time because I had a co-counselor to go into at night into the props, into the was it the arts and craft shack, the wood shop. They had all the tools there and the materials. So I would started fabricating around his wheelchair a structure every night overnight, spent like 3 to 5 hours on his wheelchair to refabricate it. So the next day, when you walked into camp, in the dining room or when people start, he was part of the theme. Like it literally, he was like a stagecoach. And then the next was like a Roman emperor we were pulling him with sticks, like pulling the Roman emperor. The next day was, World War, there was like, I think World War II era. So like he became a tank. Like, and he like every day was a new, like fun, pretty much a bar mitzvah in a small sense, like theming it out, which eventually led to, that I was running the props, the stage sets, and lighting for the whole camp, where I was starting to do this on the golf carts, turn them into art cars. We decorate the dining room on a high-end scale bar mitzvah with Greco-Roman stage sets, time machines, you name it. Like we built it. So I
Wow,
started in
that
that
is so
aspect.
cool. That is
So
so, so cool.
yeah, so summers I was doing that, and I didn't see it as a job at this point. It was just something giving back. At a certain point, I built a recording studio in camp over a month, like very, very much being involved with this. And I saw it as me giving, but what it gave back to me is that one, it was building my confidence. Two, working with tools I never really got to work with, and also the engagement. Meaning, when you're engaging people, it's important to get feedback. And I was getting really positive feedback, and like I got a certain name for being able to do the stuff that I was already able to do. And this time I'm still doing construction during the year, and rehabbing and fixing things. And I was not enjoying it so much. I was enjoying the props more, which I was doing for like organizations here and there, but it wasn't giving me the construction wasn't really giving me like the satisfaction. So when people started asking me, "Can you enhance my wedding? Can you enhance my cousin's bar mitzvah? Can you enhance my dad's having a birthday party? My kid brother is having a thing and he has a certain disease and like it would be great if you do this. Or can you come into the hospital room and do something for?" So I was it kind of like gave me a certain thing. It was like, hey, I have this creativity. I haven't really been using it so much. It's been off the shelf, like on and off the shelf over the years. I'm always using it, but maybe I could turn it into something that actually gives me a parnasa, some ability to make an income. So I was making an income, but at this point it wasn't substantial, and I was trying to figure out how do I go ahead and utilize it. So it wasn't like an all at once epiphany of this is what I want to do. It's kind of like a timeline of things happening and meeting people. Also, my network was very large from different places I've been to, organizations I was assisting. That's why chesed, by the way, side tangent chesed aspects, you think that you're giving, if you're really giving, it comes, it's karma. It comes back, meaning there's good connections. Usually, when you're part of an organization and part of a helping environment, there's many good people you meet. People who are going above and beyond for others, and those people, that's a great connection in terms of industry over time. Now, what I what it turned into at a certain point, whereas the light went on, is when literally was
That's cute. That was that was good.
literally this is I kind of this goes into like how to build a business, I guess. Like your dad's a rabbi at grade school, and your mom is. We had 9 children in our family. You can imagine like finances, like how do you support a family that large? Um, so there wasn't a lot of money. We were happy with what we had. Those pre-internet days, you don't see what's going on by other people so much. Was very fulfilling childhood, and we always had food, and thank God things, everything we needed wanted, like, yeah, I did want that extra thing, and like I wanted this, I wanted that, but it was just wasn't. I had to hack it. You wanted a radio, go to Radio Shack and build one. Like that kind of thing. You want a bow and arrow, so go take out a library book and make one. Like you want. So there was not a lot of money. So over time, there was no startup money. No one's giving me a handout. So there was always like, how do I do more with the tools I have? I have no more tools to create more income. So it was a little bit buy a few things, buy a drill, buy a thing. But what did is that, a friend was having an event and I told him, I can help you out. I just don't have, what you need necessarily. I would need the money up front to go rent some lights. So what I did was I looked around the rental fees and I looked around at the cost of materials and I actually purchased some not industry standard lights that I have today, but something that would do the job. And I created an atmosphere and created a beautiful space with what tools that I had. And now I've been doing this before in Camp Simcha places. I had some tools to work with. So I knew the general ideas of lighting, so I was able to do this. If I had no idea about lighting, I wouldn't have been able to go and source the materials because I wouldn't know what was needed, what would accomplish the goal. So I had the information of what basics are needed. So I purchased a certain amount of gear, and I went ahead and slowly over time used that gear at different events to save enough, meaning from doing that, besides the construction I was doing at the time, to buy one piece at a time. And I was very, the word is persevering. Uh, you can't give up. I wouldn't let the like, oh, I don't have anything going on for a week now to do a lighting, or even a month at that point, because people don't necessarily know that's what you're doing. So I would go ahead and create content based upon things that I had done and based upon anything I could find that's related to the industry. And I used that at this time. Instagram was first, the algorithm was different. They were allowing more organic reach, a lot more. And I had the basic startup with the people I knew from Camp Simcha and the people I knew from different yeshivas and organizations I was part of. And I had a general following of probably close to 1,000 people. And I used that to showcase what I'm doing in every way possible. And what that accomplished is that I started to get hit up for smaller, usually smaller jobs, but they started to get more complex as time went on. And I would go ahead and buy gear based on the job. And instead of becoming a partner and essentially being a manager for a business because they are the main partner and I'm managing the business, I didn't do that. I slowly built up a repertoire of gear needed to accomplish, and I made sure that the gear that I'm using is gonna do the maximum effect with the least budget in terms of the gear, because that's how I was doing in high life, and to reach the best outcome for the kids to create an environment. So I started doing that in business. Is that how do I maximize? Um, so it was a lot of tweaking things, getting an object, testing it out. So I was testing a lot of equipment, testing a lot of different things, and that allowed me to come not necessarily following. This is what the production company that I've worked for 5 years as a roadie has been doing, like industry standards. How do you create things that people aren't necessarily thinking about that create a mass effect in terms of aesthetic? So that led me to get the gear that was the best option for my budget, and then do maximum output in terms of effect and aesthetic. And that led to me being able to do things out of the box. And the out of the box is really what really got me started. Is that I was posting things that people aren't doing. At this time, back in 2016, 17, not many people were doing projection on walls of 3D animation. Not many people were taking the time to really light an event. The industry wasn't saturated yet, so lighting companies were charging a fortune and doing minimal work. They would put out a certain amount of gear, and this is what's on the list, and that's it. So I was doing very good work that created ambiance for spaces, and I was projecting that out into the public. Out my stories were getting, at this time it wasn't that didn't have stories yet. It was just square pictures you can post, but they were getting a lot of feed. Like I was getting 100 to 500 likes per. Any video I posted was getting 20,000 views. So what that accomplishes, I branded myself like that. I was at the right place at the right time, thank God, and that allowed enough reach that people saw what I'm doing, combined with having enough gear. So I had to become sort of like a ninja at the beginning to get really good at what I do, and by myself being able to operate without an overhead of 10 people working for me, and figure out how to do what that group of people would be doing in a way that um, basically I was doing the work of 10 people, and I was working long hours too. So the longest I've done, because I needed to make that money to buy the gear, 56 hours. Did a wedding myself, then did went on to do another job an hour drive away, set that up, took it down, went back to the wedding to takedown, and then I went to sleep for a day. But that
Not longer than a day,
20
2 days
days,
maybe to hibernate.
right? But
It
that
sounds like you
was a
really
marathon.
think outside the box.
It was a
Like it
marathon.
sounds,
Yeah,
yes, for sure a marathon. It sounds like you really think outside the box and you're like highly, highly creative. Where do you draw this inspiration from for the aesthetic, and how would you describe your overall style? Do you have one, or do you match it to what the event needs you to have?
that's a really good question. Is in general how we arrive somewhere in an aesthetic is usually many factors, and I would say that there's no one there's no one location, because you can go to a school and a teacher will get up in front of the class and say, this is how you do A, B, and C, and this is what it is. And now we have so many other teachers out there. There's so much information now, starting with YouTube to Reels to people giving DIYs to like how do you do it. Um, so I'm always noticing when I walk into a restaurant, when I walk into a wedding that I didn't do the production for, when I walk into a friend's apartment, when I walk into a newly built house, when I walk past the front or drive past the house, I'm always noticing what's there. And in terms of like when I'm on Instagram and you have to do a certain amount of engagement, I do my own marketing. Um, you see certain things that are popping up in your feed based on the algorithm, based on things you've liked. So the AI is feeding you things. Um, I'd say it doesn't come from one source. It comes from everywhere, meaning it comes from, knowing also a bit of psychology, how people perceive things, and how people view spaces, and the color themes, what they represent, and how they affect emotions too. So it's really the inspiration is osmosis. It's a constant osmosis of whether it's a little part of an event I didn't understand. I'm going to YouTube to see if there's anybody spoke about this. If there is somebody that talks about a dynamic um, within an event, I'm going to source. I do things that I'd say a lot of my time is actually spent in the industry, and recently someone said this to me is that you're not just lighting events, and this is why we have to start using you again because they haven't used me in 2 years, this particular client. And recently, the person they're doing the event for, the person making the event, specifically requested me for their bunch of their high end events that are happening in a row. And they basically found out, which is if you're going to get a deal, um, you're not necessarily going to get the product that you want in the end result, money wise. So, like, if you're trying to buy a Ferrari for the price of a Honda Accord, it's just not going to happen. So, I wouldn't say that I'm like the Ferrari of the industry, but I am doing things that are crossing the T's and dotting the I, and that comes and that's my goal. And all the things I'm always looking at, how do I do better? How do I so it's not one thing. The inspiration is coming from many, many different places. Um, I'm always a sponge for anything to do with creativity, um, how things work. I'm very visual, so I turn it over visually in my mind. I see the mechanics of it, how it functions, and that really goes into the entire industry. Is that you? I don't. Yeah. So I walk into a space. I'm not looking necessarily from the lighting guy's perspective. That's one key factor. I'm looking from the client's perspective, what they're going to see, what they're not going to see, the event planner, what they want to see, the florist. Can this be done? Like, if somebody asked me to hang a fixture you know, with florals all along it and lights, if I don't have the mechanical know-how to hang that, I'm not doing that myself. I'm going to someone who's licensed for that to get that done because it has to be there properly. But I could design it. So then I have to go find the inspiration of what it should look like, and then mechanically what makes the most sense for the person hanging it before I even start the conversation, because you don't want to come in and start giving over something that can't even be properly hung. So there's many, many factors for inspiration, and it's a constant because you need to learn new things. It's never each venue space is different, and each client is different, and each event planner is different, and each so my style is inspiration and style is that it's really I have personal taste that I like and that I do generally for myself when I'm doing something, but it's really about hearing what having the conversation and finding out what the client their expectation, the end result should look like, and then working backwards. How do we reach that and go once you do establish what the client wants?
Right. So and it's a complicated it can be a complicated process to make sure that you're able to um, properly communicate, collaborate with the end user, to make sure that the vision is aligned with what they had in mind. Can you share a little bit about your process and how you collaborate with clients, to understand their preferences and needs in terms of design?
That's a very good question in terms of how do you engage your client properly and make sure that you do meet their expectation, because if you don't, the flip side of that is that they're not hiring you again and they're not telling their friends to use it because you didn't reach their goal. So that's a key factor, knowing what their expectation is. So the process is generally starting out as first you have to make sure you're available. After doing that, it's about uh, asking the key questions. Now, does this person appreciate no lighting, meaning they want a candle at dinner? Do they appreciate bright LEDs, flashing lights, and lasers? That kind of look. Do they, meaning who are they? Is it a high-end, elegant event, sit-down dinner with beautiful tapestries of tablescapes? Um, so my process is generally, um, what do you want to see? And to get there, it's more about, um, do you like, high florals, low florals? Do you like, and this is going through the entire event as an event planner, but I'm doing this with event planners too. I'm asking how tall are your flowers? How many are there? How many people are seated? How many, you know, once I ask the logistical questions, I need to see the space also, because if you don't see the space, you're not gonna be able to envision, I have to go down there. If I've been there, it helps. I've been to many venues, it helps a lot. Um, it's about seeing the space your way, like this is what it can be here, and then what does the client want? So I'll ask, do you want to be able to see? There's a key question. You're spending, right? People are spending all sorts of for different events, but let's say they're having a $200,000 wedding, right? And that's a pretty high end, decent price tag on that. It should look aesthetically nice. It's 200 people, so that's a really it's a nice event. And you're spending 50K on florals probably at that event, maybe 30, but and you're spending what X amount extra on having tableware that was chosen. It's all rented extra. It's beautiful tablescape. And then you're choosing the tablecloths that are $60 to $80 a rental on each tablecloth. And you're hiring an event planner for X amount, whatever you're paying them. You're doing all this work and legwork. Now, you see it how you see it in your mind, whatever the conversation, whether I'm doing the event or it's an event planner and I'm just lighting it. And the client has a vision of what it's going to look like. And if you explain to them, you can do it. The best way is a photo, really, shows the difference. And because I've done different events, I could show the before and after. Is that if they're going to hire a lighting company, and this is key, and this is why the questions are asked to find out what they really want. Because if they don't care about this aspect, then it's fine. But the room itself has, chandeliers. It's got built-in lights on top, colored lighting in they put in recessed lighting, colored that's changeable, even flashes to the music if they want. And then in the walls, they also put these like strip lights, LED strip lights, that also change colors or they're warm. So it's a more modern hall, and they tell me that. So don't worry about the lighting. I just need you to do X, Y, and Z. The lighting, whatever. We don't really have to focus on it. Just get the stage washed a bit. Like I need some sort of light on the stage because they see that like that won't be seen so well. The band, so they're musicians, so they're focusing on them. So I have to start asking questions. Is that well? How much did you? I have a question for you. Who's doing the florals for you? What does it look like? Can you describe it? I was like, wow, that's exceptional. I understand that that's a really nice floral package. I understand from what flowers cost that's you're spending like $500 per centerpiece on the tables minimum, maybe 1,000. And I'm like, so the tables cost, you break it down the cost of each table. And I'm like, so understand this that if you do shut all the lights in the room to have this what they call in-house lighting, and the top of the ceiling is red or pink or orange, and then the lights on the wall or whatever, so you don't even need up lights, the wall washers. What does your table look like? You spent 2,000, let's say, per table on average, without the food even, or even 5 kids. It depends. Really depends what they're doing there. And now the entire space is gonna be dimly lit. Yes, there are some candles on the table. Those do a nice effect, but the flowers are all the same color as the ceiling, which is purple because that's the lighting you chose. So you spent so much time and effort on the month before, back and forth, what you're doing, how much, but all that effort is now not seen. It's all washed purple. You might as well just done white flowers, white tablecloth, and just white dishes on the table or whatever, and it'll all be dimly lit and not seen. So the question is to establish right away is what's the expectation? Is this a person who cares about that? Maybe they don't. Maybe they're fine with that. That's like, they really, their vibe is to have a Miami club vibe in the space. And they want, moving heads, flashing beams. And they want to have, some sort of like, lights that go boom, boom on the ceiling to change colors because it's in-house lighting. They paid extra $500 to ruin their event, but they don't see that. And basically, meaning I'm talking about, in-house lighting, there's an extra fee sometimes. And what I'm trying to explain is that this goes on with everything. So if you let's say it's not even about in-house lighting, it's about they're cutting a corner. It's like I have a guy who could do the same thing for $500 and you're charging $5,000. So I'm like, okay. So if you think that fine, if they may not understand the difference, but it's a money thing in their head and they're not interested in in actually talking about what the aesthetic is. But if you can get into the many times I do, and I have this question about the aesthetic is that is going to get you lights on the wall that light up the walls. Let's say there's no in-house lighting in the space, but you're not reaching your goal because you cut a corner. Whatever color you choose on the wall is not going to be bright enough to light the tables properly. You need pin spots coming down to aesthetically hit everything properly, make it and the right Kelvin too. Not just white, not just warm. Each kind of event needs a different temperature color. So it's a conversation, and that's just one process of the conversation. But I usually have a good anywhere between 5 to 20 minute conversation with the client describing their event, so I can understand, even if it's just that I'm doing the lighting aspect and not a just because it's a key component, but I need to know what their vision is. Ask all the questions. Is there a chuppah? Is there, you want a birthday party, but like is this like a cheesy, like, you know, cheesy bar mitzvah kind of look, or is it a 6 year old sophisticated like adult who needs like an opera singer and like, people serving cocktails, walking around serving cocktails, and needs to have that all lit very specifically, no flashing lights, all warm ambiance, amber colors, like a very aesthetically speakeasy vibe, old school speakeasy vibe from the 30s. Like, what are we doing there? So I get A to Z kind of clients asking for different things. I have some clients that come back for very specific, elegant style looks, which I love doing. And then there's, people doing themed out bar mitzvahs where we're lighting full mapping on walls with like different themes, all sorts of themes, which I've done many times. And there's other questions there is like, what does the shul allow on Shabbos? So it gets into logistical questions. Is like moving images, halachically, how does that work? Turning on and off lights on Shabbos. So sometimes I need to notify the shul is like, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it, and this is how we're accomplishing it. There's no contradictions of what your rules are or what the space, etc. So there's a lot of legwork. Events don't happen by themselves. It's more a lot of dynamic. And the main thing that helped me a lot for that is that I did take time for social work. Is that I ask enough questions to understand who the client is, understand what their expectation is, and then on all fronts make sure that it matches. There's times I don't take events specifically because I have the conversation and I realize that there's no way to satisfy this client. It just doesn't work, and or this client needs somebody else, and I'll recommend someone else. But that comes from a conversation, generally, and I um, I try to clarify as many points as possible before we even negotiate. Like, here's the estimate of what we're doing, and just clarify.
Making sure you're on the same page is really important, and educating each other on what the expectations are is vital, for having a successful event. What would you say that that is the biggest common myth about your field, of expertise?
So I think I already kind of went through this in a way. I rephrase is that I think this goes into all industry when it comes to design, and this it resonates. Is that a building is not built by itself, an event is not happening by itself. Um, when people arrive at the venue, they see it all done, and if they don't understand what goes into it, they don't know the value of it. So value, I think, definitely value, um, for what it is that you do in terms of design and aesthetics and interior design. What I dabble into that as well, and then in the event industry, the key thing I'm doing, um, creating the right vibe takes a very specific person. Not everyone who says I do this does it exceptionally well. A lot of people do. Um, it's a lot of factors that lead up to a successful event and something that is also the vibe that is, what the person's going for. So one of the things I hear from clients, a lot is you hit the spot. That's exactly what I was going for, because I took the most of the job happens before the job, meaning the physical work happens at the job, the setup, but it's usually knowing what's already supposed to happen beforehand and how it's supposed to look beforehand. Obviously, you have to adapt. You do need to adapt certain things at the actual venue, but the myth of oh, do we need to do that, or we don't have money for that, or I would tell people, you know don't you want to accomplish this goal, you don't have the means for it, just don't do it. Like, let's leave. I know you really want that, that's the vibe, but let's do something different and adapt what you want that still works, or just let's not do it at all. So I do turn certain people down. It's like, it doesn't make you want like it doesn't make sense to do what you're asking for this price point. um, but for the general people who are reaching out to me is generally the people with the means, is that the myth that lighting is not such a key factor, and like you can cut that out of a space, any space, and not really focus in on that key factor. I think that's really something that should be prioritized. It's priority. It should be made into something that is a focal, because if it's not done properly in a space, then all the other parts of it they're not properly seen. If you light a stage wrong, incorrect lighting, or you light a floral wrong, or aesthetics in a house, that doesn't have um, what's needed for that specific thing, you're either detracting or not bringing out the full potential of the space or the thing that or whatever you're trying to do, whether it's an event, whether it's a home, whether it's um, anything. When you're the outside of your house, you could do it really fast and throw harsh lighting up, and it's done outside a house for pathway lighting, or you can do the right temperatures, the right colors, create the vibe that enhances the space, and it goes into psychology. Is when you have an environment around you that is peaceful or dynamic and or exciting, depending on what the look is for the space, that affects people, colors, temperatures, everything affects moods, and it's a key factor that I think is imperative. It should be focused in and taken into account what from the starting of what you're doing is knowing that how light is going to reflect off something and how the mood's going to be set, the vibe setting. Because my primary when people ask me what I do, um, I'm a vibe curator.
I love that. That's amazing. You are really a visionary and bring that psychology into it, bringing people together, understanding people so that you can just bring the vision to life. It's not just a dream, it's not just a grand idea, but it's something that is actually implementable and not going to break the bank. So can you tell our audience, can you give them three key takeaways or tips regarding creating those good vibes?
That's the is one, knowing who your client is, what they're about a bit, what they appreciate. Um, knowing how to get that from them to ask the right questions, and then implementation of that, arriving at the goal of creating the space into what they want within a budget that they can afford. And you want to make sure, I think the most important thing is that you're meeting expectation. And that's the starting point of when I have a conversation, is that I want to make sure that I can arrive where we need to be when everything's said and done in terms of what they're um, hiring me for, that I reach that goal.
Amazing. Amazing. So where can our audience find you?
Sure. I have a website, meirkolko.com, and my portfolio to see the last many years of work can be found on Instagram at Meir, Meirkolk Design, Meir Kolk Design. I have thousands of images and videos up there of many different events I've been involved in, primarily the lighting aspect. Some are full events, some I'm involved with the decor. The majority of my portfolio is on there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mayor. I'm so happy that you joined us. This was a blast getting to know your origin story, how you got into this, what your um, what your thesis is on event planning, on lighting, on aesthetics, on good vibes. And it was so much fun to have you and speak to you about all the nitty gritty aspects of what you do.
Well, it's a pleasure being on. Thank you very much for bringing on your show, and looking forward to working with you in the future.
Amazing.